Flutter CTO survey interviews, powered by LeanCode. Let's build great apps together.
Hi, Eric.
Hi.
It's great to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
Thank you for being with us here. We're meeting during Google I/O and being super excited about the release of Flutter and new announcements regarding Flutter and its ecosystem. And today we're going to discuss, have a discussion about the Flutter and specifically about the Shorebird, your company, and about what you're doing there. So let me start with our memories from a year ago when we first met. That was during FlutterCon in Berlin, and you were telling in your keynote, the opening keynote, about frictions in the Flutter universe. What kind of frictions do you recognize right now in this ecosystem?
Yeah, my data is a little old because I've been sort of in the tank the last year trying to get code push, shipped for users. But when I last spent a while looking into it, I saw a lot of little frictions. One of the things that has gone on in the 10 years since we started Flutter is that Flutter has grown inside the Google ecosystem to solve Google problems. And that's not bad. Google has plenty of problems that Flutter can solve, but it means that there's a lot of sort of little missing pieces that make it difficult for random Joe or Jane business to be successful in adopting Flutter. And that is somewhat of the impetus of starting Shorebird, and I know that you all, in LeanCode, do some of the gap filling for these businesses. So for example of a gap, code push obviously was a big one. People wanted to use Dart in more places, and we see some of this with the server pods and the Celestes of the world, people trying to use Dart on the server. Funny story, Shorebird, that was our original pitch when we were seeking investors, was we were going to do Dart on the server. We actually pivoted away from that because I had scars from early days of Flutter, where Flutter was mostly adopted in a greenfield environment, where you adopt Flutter for your next project, and that was the same thing that I was experiencing in sales calls with Dart on the server. But Flutter also needs a build system. Hopefully maybe some of that's going to come with macros, making it easier to deal with things like the build runner. Flutter needs more guidance about adapt. I know you and I were talking about that earlier today over coffee, about that it still can be hard to adopt Flutter in a hybrid scenario, not because it's impossible to do. Most of the largest Flutter apps are all hybrid. It's just harder than it should be.
Right. Fortunately, it's on the roadmap for the Flutter team right now for this year, and I believe also beyond. This is also the thing that we had an interview about with Craig, which you can find on our channel, where we've elaborated on the idea of the hybrid apps. So thank you for mentioning that. And So indeed, the Shorebird is also bridging one of those gaps, right, with the code push.
Yeah.
What is like the biggest value related to the code push, right? What kind of problem Shorebird solves for your clients?
Shorebird is really good at emergency field medicine, right? Something has gone wrong in the wild, and you need a quick fix before you can get the full fix out to in your next release. It's really good when you pushed some piece of debugging code and it's now crashing all your backends, and it doesn't need to be, and you can push a one-line fix to Dart. Shorebird is also used by other customers when they just want to push 5 times a day. But I think the real sweet spot for us is the value to businesses that we provide as being some level insurance that they know that anywhere inside their app, no matter what line of Dart code they might have typed a bug in, because I don't know about you, but I am very bad at predicting which line of code I'm going to do wrong. But Shorebird lets you update any line of code in your Flutter app, and they use that then in this sort of quick fix, field medicine capacity, and that's where I think we see our sweet spot.
Okay, so the sweet spot is about the insurance, about the confidence. So I guess that you're targeting also the clients for whom their mobile application is one of the major channels to either acquire clients or simply provide the value to their end users, right?
By far our biggest clients are ones who their mobile presence is their only presence, or we see a lot of honestly fintech sort of activity where money is flowing through the app and mistakes cost real dollars, or whatever your local currency is.
Right. So this possible errors are costly,
Correct.
and then you need to solve them as quick as possible. Can you tell us where the Shorebird is currently the most popular? Is it in the state or globally?
Oh, it's definitely not the States. I think it sort of echoes where we see Flutter adopting. And it's not that there isn't lots of adoption of Flutter in the States, but the United States is an older mobile market. And I think where we see the most adoption from Flutter writ large, and Shorebird as well, is in some of these younger markets. India is a great example. India just has huge adoption of Flutter and huge adoption of Shorebird as a result. And I think that we're starting to see more presence of Shorebird in Europe, but it's particularly these sort of newer apps who are mostly mobile focused or entirely mobile focused, who want, as you characterize it, this insurance that they know that they can fix things when they go wrong if they're using Shorebird.
Right. And the other thing that comes to my mind is like the question about helping to solve those frictions for the Flutter ecosystem. How would you describe the proper approach? So what kind of frictions should be solved by the Flutter team themselves, and where are the opportunities for the partners in the ecosystem to provide some external solutions that still do the job?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I have long talked with my teams about is that it's important that we are always doing things that only we can do. Right? I think that's where we as humans provide our most value. And so the Google team that I used to lead, right, is very good at really deep down scrolling logic and impeller and writing, producing really reliable builds, right? They're very good at that baseline infrastructure. Where they are going to struggle is in knowing how to comply with local regulations for a Mexican bank and procurement processes, or integrating with your .NET backend, or translating from your shared configuration files in your React application. It's all these things along the edges that help Flutter to participate not just with the Google ecosystem, but with the global ecosystem. Right? And that's where people who don't have the privilege or the burden of being steeped in the Google way of doing things can really help.
Right, to solve all those edge cases and to help to spread the adoption of the Flutter among other systems. That's correct. And with the Shorebird, you're kind of betting on Flutter, right? So
very much so.
Very much so, right? So you are hoping for the Flutter to either have a dominant or have at least substantial role in this mobile development ecosystem in general, right? So from your perspective, because other cross-platform frameworks are catching up quickly, right? So when the Flutter appeared on the market, it was revolutionary, right? I remember ourselves, we were transferring initially from going through Xamarin firstly, then for React Native, and once we've encountered Flutter, it was somewhere early 2018, so before the first official release, we were simply delighted by the whole experience, the development experience, etc. But the things like hot reload and etc. appeared in other cross-platform frameworks. So what are currently those differentiators that make Flutter really a cutting-edge technology?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think about it maybe a little differently. I didn't set out to build Flutter. I set out to help the world, stop writing everything twice. And I tried to make the web that solution for a decade before we built Flutter, and I couldn't make it good enough. I worked on browsers for a long time, right? And so I think it's really good and healthy that there are lots of mobile solutions out there. I do think that, when we did Flutter, part of what we were doing is we were bringing, web technology to mobile in 2014. So the web has had hot reload or things akin to it for a very long time. I don't think that I don't think it's maybe like one specific feature that makes Flutter, the perfect solution forever. Not that that's what you said, but like I think it's more that I view multi-platform as inevitable, because I just don't think that single platform development is the way that we as humanity progress. And I think that Flutter has done a good job. I think we've done a good job of packaging it in a way so that it all works together consistently, and was written in the last 10 years. And I think those two things sort of combined, just having been done recently and been packaged well to make a pleasant development experience that works reliably for businesses, to let them get their mobile app done, get their screens accounted for, and move on with the rest of their business, move on with the rest of their lives.
Right, and it seems like in the very near future, we'll be not even forced to do the things not only twice, but even 3 times, because of the evolution that Flutter right now also, that happens in the Flutter on the website, right? So the Flutter for Web is getting into the spotlight also during Google I/O, and with the arrival of WASM and the support for WASM, which is stable. So what are the news like currently in the Flutter universe that you are excited about as the former head of Flutter engineering team?
I'm really excited to see the Impeller team ship. Impeller has been just such a long journey of moving away from a graphic system that was designed for a browser to a graphic system that is designed for Flutter. And I think that team has done a great job, and I know that they've shipped on iOS and they're nearly shipped on Android, so I'm very excited about that. I'm excited to see WASM, coming out. The WASM journey for Dart has been a long journey. The journey for WASM in general has been a long journey.
Right?
I think we have a long journey still until WASM really...
Yeah, it's because of this,
Correct,
it being supported by browsers, etc., right? So
exactly.
It's still in its infancy, we can say, right? But that's
Completely.
the future. That's definitely...
Yeah, I think that WASM is a part of the future. I think that it's interesting to see what Flutter on the web shakes out to be. I mean, Flutter on the web is hard to sell, I have found. Not because it's not a great product. I think it is a great product. I think it's just the web is such a big space, and it's hard to explain, well, this is a thing that's really good at writing web apps, not websites, right? And that's as simple as we've condensed it down to maybe those 5 words, it's still a hard message to sell to people. And so Flutter Web is very good at taking your mobile experience and bringing it to the web, which is super great for internal testing, internal dashboards, maybe when your entire experience really should be like Reddit, for example.
Right.
Why is there a mobile web app like that you view in Chrome on your iPhone? Why is it 15 years? Like, why isn't it just a transliteration of, it would be strictly better to be the Flutter web version of their Flutter app, right? And I think that for businesses by which their mobile web presence wants to be an app or an appy experience and is maybe not the number one thing for them, but they would be better as just a translation, Flutter Web is perfect. But I think also Flutter Web is not designed to build Google.com.
Right.
Not designed to build your blog.
Right.
And that's a hard thing to explain.
Yes, that's not the tool that suits all purposes. And that's also the thing that we've elaborated on in our interview with Kevin Moore, which you can find on our channels, where we've discussed the different cases where the Flutter for Web is indeed applicable. Great. And so we've talked about the current state of the affairs and what's included in the current release during Google I/O. And what do you think is the future for the Flutter if we were to go one step forward and try to imagine if you were still in charge of simply from your perspective, what are your hopes, what are your expectations regarding the Flutter framework for the future?
I think maybe less about the technology, and maybe that's because although I do write a lot of code these days, for many years at Google didn't write code necessarily in my daily job. I think a lot about the people, a lot about the community of Flutter, and how great that has been and continues to be. I think a lot about the business growth that I see going on, in this community as well, like just all the startups that are not just using Flutter, but are building things for Flutter. Like Flutter has reached the size of an ecosystem where people are building companies, like I am doing, to sell into it. Like, that's amazing in and of itself, but it also is something that I find exciting, right? Like, again, I am very excited about the core technologies that we were producing at Google, but I'm more excited by the things that I see coming, from the wider market. And I think that we're just in those early stages, and I think, a year from now, there's going to be even more product companies selling into Flutter, even more companies who are helping, all these many, many, many large businesses who are using these other technology stacks, which maybe are serving their needs, maybe are not, to have a clear, easy path to adopting modern multi-platform with Flutter.
Right, and I totally agree with that. I think the way the community grows and the way we can observe this external support is indeed really inspiring, and it's a great proof that the Flutter is working and bringing value to its users. And so eventually, at the end of the day, it's all about adoption. It's all about trying to understand how Flutter can be useful for new cases, for new apps, for new products. Great. Thank you so much, Eric. It was great having you. Thank you for the discussion, and I hope we are going to meet soon at other Flutter events. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Build your next project with us. Schedule a free 30 minutes consultation.